Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Matthew 5:37, the Bible. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. You know what? Do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And then for the really serious folks out there, you can hit that bell so you never miss an episode. All right. So let me just start off by saying that I know there is a storm coming and I am anticipating still streaming tomorrow and Friday, but I will determine that based on how this storm plays out. As of right now, my anticipation is that there's no reason for me not to. I've got the little Doppler radar up here on the screen so that you can see where the storm is right now. It's down there by Havana. And then as we move forward, we can see that about 12 a.m. on Thursday morning, it's going to move a little further. And then Thursday around afternoon time, we're going to be right up there along the Gulf Coast here on Florida, moving right on up. And then Friday, that's when you can see it looks like Jacksonville is going to be getting a lot of rain. So we will see how things play out. But my anticipation is that I will be doing the show, but we will see. You never know. We have no idea how this storm is going to play out, whether or not the electricity will hold, all those good things. All right. So yesterday, I did a show where was reviewing this Jubilee debate, and apparently, um, YouTube didn't like that so much. I don't really know what happened, but somewhere around the 52-minute mark, the stream got cut from YouTube, and the only thing the only indication of anything was that the stream was cut and it said stream, stopped for policy violation, but didn't say what violation. I reached out to YouTube on Twitter and on X, and they started to respond. They were like, "Hey, what's the stream link so we can look at it?" And then I got no further response from them. I presume this was all automated, but I really, I really don't know. And when I go and look through my channel, like there are areas in the channel where I can look and see, like, okay, what violations have I had, those kind of things, and I didn't see anything. There was nothing there. They just literally stopped the stream for no particular, no specific reason. So there's no any indication. So I don't know what was going on with that. And maybe you might think, okay, well, it's because you're using somebody else's content. But I've done that before, and I have received copyright claims, and then I've pushed back on the copyright claims and said, hey, I'm engaging in fair use here because I'm critiquing, I'm doing commentary on these things, I'm making sure to I'm presenting these as clips, that I'm using. Here's the original source. I'm citing my sources from where I get this stuff from. So I'm not really, and it's always been fine. Like they've always come back and said, okay, well, we'll lift the copyright claim. And so I've never had a problem until yesterday. So I don't know what's going on. We're going to try this again today. We're going to finish up part 2. And if something happens, keep an eye on the comments. You can always go to rumble.libertydad.com. They don't appear to be having a problem with this. So I don't know. Maybe we'll have a problem today. Maybe we won't. I have no idea. Really don't. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about getting comfortable with your argument. And what I did yesterday, just as a quick recap, the Jubilee debate was about 1 hour and 45 minutes. And you had 20 Trump supporters that were in a circle, and their role was to debate this one lone progressive liberal guy. And this guy isn't just any guy, it's what he does. He enjoys it. He's not stupid. He's smart. He knows his stuff, and he was prepared. And then the way that it works is they have a system where people can come up and engage in debate for a few minutes. And they go through, I think they went through like 3 or 4 different resolutions. And each resolution was the liberal guy, his name is Dean. So Dean would say, okay, well, here's my resolution. And then somebody would come up and, people could race up and debate him for a few minutes. And then there was a system where they could exchange that person for another person. So that was the show. And so I just kind of went over and I said, okay, well, here are these couple different people. And I took different clips of him debating different people and I gave some thoughts on the arguments that were made. And then today, what I want to do is now I want to focus on this 10-minute ending segment. So the way that it works is, each person can, the people can run up and sit down and have a debate with them. And then the crowd, if they decide they want somebody else, they can swap them out. But at the end, Dean gets to choose one of the 20 or one of the people that he's debated. And then that person comes up and they give their resolution. And then they debate that topic uninterrupted for 10 minutes. So there are no flags. There's no exchanging people. That's just like the final portion of it. It's actually a pretty neat system. And I kind of like it. I think it would be kind of fun to do. But so we're going to walk through that 10-minute segment because I thought when I watched it, I was like, wow, there's a really, we can really learn a lot about debating people from that segment, even more than just what we learned yesterday. So today we want to focus on getting comfortable with your argument, what that means. Before I do that, let me play this clip. Now, this comes from Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? And this comes from his trailer, but it's also in the video itself. And I want to just kind of lead in with this. It's I titled it in my little notes here, Are You a Cat? So let's play this. And we're going to kind of lay the groundwork for what it means to get comfortable with your argument. So here we go.
Women only know what women are.
Are you a cat?
No.
Can you tell me what a cat is? You want to tell us what a woman is?
All right. So a very quick clip there. And you could see he was like, hey, she was like, hey, only a woman can determine what a woman is. And he's like, well, are you a cat? And person hangs their head down and then walks away. The full clip, they're like, this was a mistake. I should have never agreed to talk to you. And then they walk away. And then he's like, hey, do you want to tell us what a woman is? Clearly, they were not comfortable with their argument because when Matt took it to the logical conclusion, they were like, well, I don't want to talk anymore. Right. And that's problematic. That means you're not comfortable with your argument because the logical conclusion was if only a woman can determine what a woman is, then only a cat can determine what a cat is. So therefore, the question, are you a cat, which sounds preposterous, isn't. It's actually following the logical conclusion. And the right answer would have been, if they were following along the logical conclusion of their argument, would be to say, I can't say, right? I'm not a cat. I can't say. I can't answer that. I don't know, right? And of course they know. We all know. They're not a cat because we can think and we can reason. And so when you're not comfortable with your argument, you get shut down. Now, this next clip also comes from the Jubilee. And this is a clip that I didn't play yesterday. And it's about roughly about 2 minutes, I think. And so what this clip is, it's similar to the Are You a Cat, but it's a little bit less preposterous. In the initial, nobody walks around asking people if they're a cat. That just seems weird. So now let's put this in the context of an actual argument. So let's play this clip, and then you're going to see how that same issue plays out in a more in an argument that you're more likely to have on a day-to-day basis. So let's play this clip here real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously think being in a room surrounded by 20 conservatives, you're not going to look at access to abortion as healthcare. I think.
No, I'm sorry. Continue.
No worries.
This is a dialogue. You want a good, fruitful dialogue? Let's continue. I'm apologizing. I just.
Sweet. Yeah, and I understand that there's going to be an ideological separation there, but from my side of the aisle, I absolutely think that this is something that should be federally protected. I think that infringing upon women's right to bodily autonomy, bodily integrity, all because they want to preserve the life of a non-sentient, or sorry, a multicellular life form that doesn't.
Did your mom thought that about you? She was about to
she
thought that you were just some cells.
My mom, when I was where? I mean, it doesn't care whether she thought I was that.
So you were just a bunch of cells. So that's what you're just believing in your claim.
Well, I mean, well, my particular claim was the reason why I'm pro-choice is because I don't value the life of a uni or multi-cell.
But you have life.
That doesn't
so
have
you
the
get to
ability
make that change. You get to make that choice by having life. And someone that doesn't have that voice to say like, oh, that's just a bunch of cells, just abort it. Where does that stand? How is that patriotic? How is that loving America?
Yeah, because it protects access to healthcare. It protects the
Killing
preservation-
babies,
One moment.
killing children. Okay.
Okay, so do you think abortion's murder?
Yes.
Okay, so do you think
I'm
that?
making that statement very
Okay,
clear.
well, so
Okay, so let's stop that. She's a little on the smug side, and then she says, "I'm making this statement very clear: abortion is murder." So what I want you to do is pay very close attention where he takes this and how she responds.
do you think that some women with IUDs are murderers then? Because it is the case in some contexts. An IUD will allow for conception to occur, meaning there's a unique human life there, but then it will it will prevent its implantation into the uterine lining, killing it.
I don't support or believe in any of that.
Well,
I
to be
just
fair, that
think
wasn't the question I
there's
asked you. I
natural-
asked you if they were
So-
murderers.
I have no comment on that.
Okay, so very interesting. She's like, "Well, wait, no, I don't really have a comment on that." And all he did was he took her argument to the logical conclusion. She said, "Hey, abortion is murder." It's like, "All right, well, what do we do with murderers? We put them in jail. We arrest them. We do things to them, right?" And so now he's taken to the logical conclusion, and she's not comfortable with this. So let's go.
Well, didn't you just say that abortion was murder because it was killing a
Yeah.
unique human life?
Yeah.
IUDs can and do kill unique human life. So wouldn't this make women with IUDs murderers?
Well, I again have no comment on that.
Okay, so she has no comment because she's not comfortable with her argument, her own argument. She has not taken the time to evaluate the logical conclusion of her argument. And she initially kind of starts off, and there's a longer segment of her engaging with Dean, and she gets a little bit smug a few times, and that's fine. But be mindful when you're smug like that. If you're ill prepared to deal with your argument, then when somebody else breaks it down and then takes it to the logical conclusion, you're going to look like a fool, and you're not going to be comfortable with it, and you're going to realize you've been backed in a corner. And that's exactly what happened to her. She realized, I'm backed in a corner. I'm not because she knows what the answer is based on her own argument. She knows that Dean is correct in saying, if you believe this is murder, then the usage of an IUD means that you are a murderer, because that's like a murderer commits murder. That's the only way murder happens, is by having an individual who is the murderer. And so therefore, what do we do with murderers? Right? We lock them up. We jail them. And she knew where this was going. So now what I want to do is, if you watched or listened to yesterday's episode, you heard the last gentleman that I really, really liked. And they don't give his name, but he's very respectful, and he's actually very smart, and he has his argument laid out very well. And you don't really notice it in the initial clips when he's debating Dean in the shorter segments. But when he gets to the 10-minute segment, which is we're gonna watch that now. We're gonna walk through it. We're gonna see where he really, really has his argument worked out, and he's very comfortable with his argument. And so he is not going to be taken to a place with his own argument where he is not, where he is uncomfortable with it. So let's, before we do that, let's take a look at some comments here, and let's say good morning to you, Time Surfing Alien. Appreciate you here as always. Let's see. Let's go down here. Question: doesn't an IUD prevent pregnancy in the first place? There's no clump of cells when you have an IUD or other birth control. I'm not terribly familiar with IUDs. I didn't look this up, but according to Dean, and I'm going to take him at his word, there are certain instances where a pregnancy, I believe conception can still happen, but the IUD prevents the pregnancy from attaching to the uterus, and so therefore it effectively is killing it, and so you're interrupting the process on purpose. So I believe that is how that works out. And there are certain situations where that happens. So, all right. So we're going to now take a look at Dean's argument. Dean's final debate with this other gentleman who was in the black shirt. So let's take a listen, and I'm going to stop it periodically, but I think this was definitely worth watching.
First, I want to shake your hand. I hope to have a respectful dialogue with you.
Okay, stop. I know. Right. DLs, don't stop. You stop it right away. That's perfect. He sits down. He's like, let me shake your hand and just lay it out. I want to have a respectful dialogue. If you want somebody to accept your ideas, be somebody that's worth listening to. If you're just coming to the table to get snarky, to roll your eyes, to try to dunk on them, then they're probably not going to walk away thinking about your argument. And my position is that I always try to make sure that someone says, that's an interesting point. Because if I can get you to say that's an interesting point, I know you're going to think about it. Right. And so that's my goal isn't to win the argument per se, although my wife would probably disagree. There are certain times where I get a little punchy, and I got to be told, hey, chill out, back up. But ultimately, the goal here is to get people to rethink their argument and consider yours. And this is a good start.
My claim is that abortion is immoral or not justified. And so I think it kind of comes down to four main reasons. So logically, the argument is to kill an innocent human being is morally wrong. I'm sure you agree with that one. The second is that abortion is the killing of an innocent human being. So therefore, abortion is morally wrong.
Okay, so he just lays out this high level overview of how he sees the argument. And you can see that Dean nods his head at the first statement. Yes, I agree. Killing innocent person is morally wrong. Okay. And so he's got common ground. They no longer need to address that particular portion of the argument. They can move forward because they found he's created common ground already. Where do we agree? So let's find out where we agree and then get to where we disagree and have that discussion.
So that's the logical argument. But I think there's 4 points that you're going to bring up that determine whether or not a fetus is human or not. So first is size. Second is level of development. 3 is environment. And 4th is degree of dependency. So all those things, kind of what I hear pro-choicers say, fall under those categories. And none of those categories determine human value or human worth.
Okay, this is phenomenal. He has literally sat down. You don't hear this very often. He sat down and he said, look, every argument that I've heard from a pro-choice person falls within one of these 4 categories, right? So he's kind of stating, here is my understanding of your argument. So this is from the very beginning. He's like, and I think that you're going to fall into you're going to make arguments that fall into one of these 4 categories. So he's clearly prepared. He understands his own argument, and he has a sense for his opponent's argument before they've even spoken, right? Because he's taken the time to, presumably he's debated this before, maybe he's read up on it. Maybe he's made, observations and sat down and really considered them. Whatever it is that's led him to this point, he has a certain level of understanding of of his opponent's argument. You cannot bring an opponent around to your ideas if you don't first have an understanding of theirs. It's not possible. All you're going to be doing is trying to do what everybody did before this particular moment in the debate, and that's trying to win by dunking on them. That's all that's happening. All right, so let's continue.
You being valuable as a human is based, one, in the fact that you are a human, like that you are part of the human species.
Okay.
But secondly, I would say because you are made in the image of God as well.
Okay.
And so that would be, I think, the basis of why I am pro-life.
Okay. Yeah, let's have a conversation about this, man. So first of all, I'll just tell you why I'm pro-choice. So I'm pro-choice because I only value life forms that would fall into a specific conjunction of traits. I value any life form that has a conjunction between past or present and future subjective experiences. And it's not until about 20 through 24 weeks that is true of a fetus. Therefore, prior to that point, I'm not going to associate value with the life of that fetus. Second of all,
So let me just stop it right here real quick. He's basically making a consciousness argument. That's basically what it amounts to. It's a consciousness argument. It's like, look, you got some subjective experiences, and if you can't experience life, then therefore you are not life. It's basically consciousness, which comes up a little bit later.
you said that a human was valuable, A, because it's human, and B, it's made in the image of God. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the idea that you value it because it's made in the image of God, and that is what makes you vote for pro-life legislation. I don't think that we should be using faith-based beliefs to vote for legislation.
Why not?
Because when this has been used historically, this has led to very negative outcomes. One individual might say,
that's not true.
one moment. So one person might say that slavery is okay because God said so, and you're saying that abortion is wrong because God said so. How do we distinguish between those two statements?
See, I never said that, actually. I gave a whole logical argument that's separate from scripture. But
Okay, we can talk about
you agreed to my first premise, so I don't even know why you're bringing it up.
Okay, so see, that is exactly why when he laid out his argument and said, look, leg one, leg two, I think how does it go? Statement one, statement two, conclusion, right? He said, look, you agreed to the first statement. So now you're taking this argument somewhere else. It's not me, it's you. So he is maintaining to some degree control of the argument or control of the conversation. And I don't mean control like you do as I say, but control in the sense that he is kind of driving it because he has laid the foundation for it and said, this is the direction we're going to go. He got Dean to accept it. And so now he's like, look, this is the direction we're going. You agreed to this.
Just seems kind of like a red herring.
Okay.
So
Maybe
you agree to my first premise that killing an innocent human person is wrong, right?
I do not. So I don't
Okay.
think in all scenarios that ending the life of an innocent human being is wrong. I wouldn't say that it
Really?
would be wrong for a fetus before 20 through 24 weeks for the reason it falls outside of that conjunction of value I gave you. It doesn't have the ability to deploy first-person subjective experiences. And maybe you'll
So what
agree
does
with
that
me.
mean? Explain that to me.
Yeah, so like a first-person.
So I'm going to point out here real quick. He said, what does that mean? Explain that to me. Never be afraid to say that. Now, I'm going to make a guess. I have no idea. I think the guy in black that just said that, I think he has an idea of what it means. I don't think he's asking because he doesn't know. I think he's asking because he wants to be clear exactly what does Dean mean when he says that. So never be afraid to ask somebody and say, what do you mean when you say that? Because it might sound like, well, at face value, duh, of course this means this. But people sometimes use words in different ways. So you want to make sure that you're very clear what somebody means, because again, you cannot bring someone around. You cannot attack their argument properly if you don't fully and correctly understand it.
Subjective experience is, like a type of qualia that we all experience, and what gives us an inference of the idea that you're sitting in a chair in front of a microphone, and you can engage with me in a subjective way. It's a little bit hard to explain, but we could sum this up as consciousness. And then, second of all, let's see if maybe you agree with your first premise. Would you say it is murder to pull the plug on a brain dead patient?
Yeah, but I think that's irrelevant to the debate.
Okay, this is great. He's comfortable with his argument. Dean tries to take it to a place and says, okay, well, if this is what you believe, are you okay with it in this particular case? Yes, I am. Right? You have to be comfortable with your argument. You have to be comfortable with the logical conclusion. And if you're not, then either one of two things is either you don't really believe it, or you haven't thought it through well enough. One of those two is the case. All right, so let's continue.
You say that that's murder, and it's not irrelevant to the debate. So do you think that that should be made illegal?
Yeah, I think so.
To pull the plug on a brain dead patient?
Yeah, if that person is still alive, then yeah, we cannot make that choice.
Okay.
We have to let nature take its course for that.
Okay. Maybe something else we could say here.
Okay, so now Dean has to shift somewhere else, because normally in a debate, people are not that comfortable with it. And so when you bring something up like that, that is generally brought up to kind of say, it's kind of like an aha, I gotcha, right? Dean can't do that because he's comfortable with the argument. He's like, the man is like, oh, yeah, I believe that. That's fine. But also, that's not what we're talking about.
Human life begins at the moment of conception, yeah?
Yeah, I would agree to that.
Okay, and it's murder to kill it after that. So would you say, this was a question I asked earlier, would you say that women with IUDs can be murderers? Because in some contexts, an IUD will allow for conception to occur, but then it will...
IUD, explain that.
So an IUD is a form of birth control. It's
Yeah.
inserted into a female's cervix, I believe. Maybe I'll get fact checked.
Well, so yeah,
I mean, what it does is in some scenarios, it can prevent conception of a unicellular zygote. In others, it will allow for conception to occur, then prevent implantation.
If conception happens and then the fetus is terminated, that is murder.
Okay, so you'd say that some women with IUDs are murderers.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
think that all
So like, dude is straight comfortable with his argument, whether it's right or wrong, he is comfortable with it. And so he's not going to be taken advantage of by bringing in an additional circumstance that says, okay, well, the logical conclusion of your argument in this particular case results in this other case. Are you cool with that? And he's like, I sure am. I'm fine with that. And so none of the standard debate tactics of trying to get one on somebody are going to work here because he's comfortable with it. He's good with it. He's thought it through well enough.
murderers should go to jail?
Well, yeah, I do.
Okay, so then you'd say that some women with some forms of birth control should go to jail?
Yeah, and see now we're on a red herring though. You're
No,
talking
it's
about
called a reduction out of
policy.
absurdism.
You're talking about policy, but what?
This isn't policy.
But you're avoiding the actual discussion.
No, this isn't
the
avoiding
actual discussion is what is a fetus? What is the unborn? And your only argument against that was level of development. And you said you have to be conscious that's what you value.
Okay,
Yeah?
so first of
So I think this was a good point. Now he does kind of sidestep it, right? Because he's like, look, we're not talking about policy. Because if you remember his resolution is abortion is immoral and not justified. That's it. That's his premise. And so Dean is trying to say, okay, well, based on these other similar-ish circumstances, let me see if I can tear down your argument. Right. And he's like, well, hold on. We're not talking about policy right now. That's we can have a policy discussion at a later point. But right now we're talking about human life. Let's focus on that. And so he stays focused on his argument. Very good.
all,
Is that correct?
yeah, so
That your only
I only value life forms that have a conjunction of past or present and future subjective experiences. But I would like to repeat, no, that line of questioning was not a red herring. It was using your logic to imply a certain.
No, but
So one moment,
but
just
you're
allow me
getting
to,
away
just
from
allow
the
me
thing.
30 seconds to finish here, right? So the same logic you're using to imply that that abortion is murder and should be criminalized has also led you to the conclusion that women that use some forms of birth control should be sent to jail. Okay, I don't think that's logic we should trust
but also,
because of how absurd the conclusions can be.
No, but here's the problem is that people within the pro-life movement disagree on that stuff. So you can't use that to discredit the entire pro-life movement.
I'm using that to discredit your stance.
No, but what every pro-lifer agrees on and what the heart of the issue is that you seem to be running away from is what is the unborn. And so your example of consciousness falls into level of development. But so does that mean that if we have someone, and you said, I think, subjective experiences and things like that as well. Does that mean if someone is born blind and deaf, they're less of a human being?
No,
Because they can't have the same experiences as the rest of us?
So before we get to Dean's answer here, first, let me pause and point out that that Liberty Lady Points has noted that the stream just went down on Facebook. So here is the Rumble link. That's a long link. If you're able to look at the chat, you can click on it. But yeah, and presumably if you're on YouTube, you're not going to be able to see or hear any of this at this particular time. But rumble.libertydad.com, that will get you straight to my channel over on Rumble. So apologies that the stream went down. I don't really know what's going on. I will see if I can't press YouTube for some answers as to find out exactly why the stream is being taken down. I presume there's automation going on in the background that says, hey, we recognize this clip. You are not authorized to play this clip. So therefore, we're stopping your stream. That's my presumption. I don't really know. So I will find out and get some answers for you guys at a later time. All right. Also, I want to point out on what we just heard. So the gentleman here, he is still maintaining control of the conversation because he's like, hey, look, we are talking about life. And where he's taking this, he's like, look, we need to discuss what is life. And yeah, there are disagreements within the pro-life movement, but where we all agree in the pro-life movement is what he's saying. Like where we all agree is that human is this element of human life and protecting it. Now, from there, policy differences do occur, and so he told Dean straight up. He's like, "You're running away from the argument because Dean is trying to not address his issue, but rather address the other man and say, okay, well, yeah, but what about this? What about this? What about this? He keeps playing this what about so that he does not have to answer the questions about his own argument. So that's where we are. All right, let's continue.
First of all, I don't think that level of experiences, like I don't know, a newborn being less conscious than you or I, that's not going to determine them to have less value. My statement would be if they have any subjective experiences, they're going to have the same amount of value, and that's going to be consistent across the board. Second of all, I'm not using this determinator for moral value, that being like first-person subjective experiences, to evaluate what is or isn't a human. A unicellular zygote from the moment of conception is a human, as determined by biologists, right? They have unique human DNA, right? My assertion here is that I do not value the fetus prior to that point because they lack this ability that is necessary for them to be harmed. They don't have a well-being. They can't be harmed. They don't have first-person subjective experiences. And to say that all human life, regardless of the point of its development, including a unicellular zygote, is just as valuable, that's insane.
But you're putting a barrier on what is a human being.
No.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm
That's
already
what
told.
you have to do.
No.
And I mean, we all put the barrier somewhere. Pro-lifers say.
I will clarify again. It's a human being from the moment of conception. Not all human beings are valuable, of course.
Okay. What I was saying is we all put the barrier somewhere. And so pro-lifers are going to put the barrier on conception because that is when it is an independent human being. But you're putting the barrier on consciousness. And I'm saying,
it's true.
So if you're going to put the barrier there, the problem is that the result of that view is that people with less consciousness have less value.
Okay. So now what he's done, Dean has used a lot of words in a fancy way, effectively. And I don't mean this derogatorily, but he's used a lot of words to basically say, I don't value human life until it gets to a point that it has consciousness. That's basically his argument. And then the man comes back and says, okay, there are problems with that. And now he's like, let's take your argument to its logical conclusion. And let's see if you are comfortable with your own argument. Now, the man in black, he's already determined, like, I'm comfortable with it. Like you ask me a question, are people murderers in this context? Yes. He's like, do you think this is murder? Yes, I do. Do you think this is the problem? Yes, I do. And he's like, so he's very comfortable with the logical conclusion of his own argument. Dean, however, appears so far to not be as comfortable with it because he's kind of being evasive, right? This is why the man points out, he says, well, what if somebody's in, a vegetative state? Like they're not having an experience. And this is not a new argument. Like people have argued this before. They've said, like, look, what happens if somebody is, somebody is in a coma for 10 years, right? In somewhere in that 10 years it's interesting. Is somewhere in that 10 years, are they no longer human? Are they no longer worth defending, worth protecting? Right. And that's where this consciousness argument breaks down for many people because they're unwilling to say that, because it's easy for them to say, well, while it's in the womb, while it doesn't have consciousness, let's allow let's allow abortion. But then when you apply that outside of the womb, all of a sudden they don't want to hold to their consciousness argument nearly as tightly. All right, we're almost done with this, and then we can end the show and I can figure out what's going on with YouTube.
It is not.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Why is that not the case?
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
because,
I love this. He's asking, he's like, it is. No, it's not. Why? Okay. your best defense in an argument is to ask questions. The more questions you can ask, and I don't mean just like bombard people with questions and ask them a bunch, like they have to be strategic and of value. Ask people questions. Why do you believe that? Why are you disagreeing with me right now? Why this, right? Ask questions, because a question makes a person have to open up and see, have they really thought through their own argument? Or are they just kind of winging it at a certain point?
Function for value is meeting the conditions of having the ability to deploy consciousness, right? But if you deploy more consciousness than another human, that doesn't mean you have more value than them. Any level of consciousness, right, is going to yield the same amount of value as the next. I think that as soon as a fetus gains this ability to deploy these first-person subjective experiences, that they have just as much value as
deploy consciousness. So what about if you have someone that is unconscious, that cannot deploy consciousness?
Well, once
Can
again,
we just kill them?
No, because they would still meet the conditions of my conjunction for distributing more value.
What's the conditions?
That being past or present consciousness and future consciousness, right? So if you meet
and
that
future consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting, and I don't think he touches upon it, but future consciousness includes a fetus, because the fetus may not have it presently, but it will have it in the future, right? And he picks up on that. He's like, wait a minute, hand, okay.
Okay, so if they have the potential for consciousness.
I do not think that the potential for consciousness in the future on its own would yield a morally valuable.
Okay, so now you're walking back on.
I am not walking back.
Yeah, you did, because you said.
I have a question. Is the potentiality for consciousness?
Hold on, can you let me finish? Because you've been complaining about everyone interrupting, and that's fair. But I need to make my point. All right. So you were saying that you were just saying about future consciousness, and that's exactly the argument with the pro-life, is that they have the potential for that consciousness. And again, you're discriminating based on level of development. And if we were to discriminate against a toddler or whatnot based off of level of development, if that's what it means to be human, then that introduces a subjective aspect.
You're just kind of making talking points now, right? I've already clarified that this isn't what makes someone.
So I just want to point out, you can see that Dean is getting a little bit frustrated, or you can maybe hear it in his voice if you're listening to the show. And the reason is because his argument is getting broken down and he doesn't like where it's going. And I know that he's arguing and saying, hey, you're misunderstanding my argument. But the man isn't. The man is pointing out and he's saying, look, we both have barriers. Everybody has a barrier or a moment where we say, this is the point for which we protect human life. Before that, we don't. And he said pro-lifers, they use conception. Now, they may differ on policy after that. Like at what point would they say it's, we have to defend and protect human life and stop people from killing it. He said, but we know where we started. And Dean is saying, Dean is saying that he believes it starts somewhere later, somewhere in the early 20 week mark, when consciousness starts developing. And he's really working hard to try to say, okay, well, we've got consciousness, or what he says, first person experiences. And he said past or present. And then he said, and future or something like that. So he's basic, and he gets mad and he's like, look, there's this conjunction, that you're missing. And so what he's trying to do is insulate himself from any argument by saying, okay, well, here's all these criteria. But when you start looking and you break down the criteria, his argument is subject to the same ones that to the same critique that anybody else's argument is subject to. And that is, what about in this situation? Are you comfortable with applying it here? He is not. The man in black is.
Human. This is what makes a human morally valuable.
Yeah, but
I've also clarified, one moment, allow me to finish.
Sure,
allow me to finish. I've also clarified here that no, I do not value potential for future consciousness on its own. I value it in conjunct to past or present. I feel as if you are almost ignoring my argument, conceiving of an argument.
Okay, well, we have it on video of you not just saying past and present, but you saying future. Okay. So, I mean, you're walking back. If you want to admit that you're walking it back, that's fine. That's totally fine. But that's what you said.
Okay, so
You
when the
deny that?
So yeah, when the people at home watch this and scrub, their YouTube, bar at the bottom back, they will see that I said past or present consciousness and future consciousness.
Yeah, and future consciousness.
That's what we call
Exactly.
a conjunction.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Would you like me to describe to you what a conjunct is and why I would use that to
So, okay, so
prescribe more
you're-
value?
Good dialogue.
All right. So he shakes his hand. He says, good dialogue, and he walks away. I think now, regardless of where you stand, whether you agree with one or the other, that's not really relevant. That's not the point of this particular episode. The point was to say this was a good debate, and you can learn a lot from that simple 10-minute segment, right? First and foremost, the man who sits down to debate with Dean, he sits down and he says, look, here is a high level overview of my argument. Then he goes on and he says, I believe that your arguments, anything that you're going to bring up, is going to fall into one of these 4 buckets, right? And he points out size, level of development, environment, degree of development. And he says, so he has an understanding of the arguments that are going to be coming his way already. So he's kind of familiar with them, right? That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a new point that's made that he has to deal with on the fly. That just means that he has taken the time to understand his opponent's argument. And then as they go through, because he understands his argument, because he's comfortable with his argument, because he's taken the time to understand his opponent's argument, he is able to go and call Dean out and say, whoa, hold up. We already agreed on this. Are you changing your mind? Do you no longer agree? Right. And then he can say, okay, well, what you're saying right now falls into this particular category. This is why I believe that it is incorrect. Right. And so he is able to kind of control the conversation. And so he doesn't end up getting taken on a wild goose chase, which to a degree Dean was trying to do. Dean was basically saying,